Hi everyone, my name is Udit. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the program management interview that typically comes up in the Google Program Manager on-site interview loop. Keep in mind this video is being made for the non-technical program manager role. I've already recorded one for the technical program manager role that requires a lot more technical context and background. I'll include a link to that in the description below, but if you're interviewing for a non-technical role, this is the video for you. At the end of this video, you should have a pretty good understanding of what to expect in this interview, what your interviewers are looking for, and a couple of tips on how to prepare for it. Quick introduction, I'm from Prepfully. We offer online anonymous mock interviews with Google Program Manager coaches. We also offer free mock interviews with other candidates who are also in the middle of their interview journeys. The Google Program Manager coaches who provide mock interviews and advice are also the ones who've helped us prepare content for this video. So a big thanks to all of you. Right, so on to the program management interview then. In a nutshell, this interview focuses on your ability to demonstrate core program management competencies. The first such competency, or rather the first such competency bucket, is an execution focus. All the way from how you come up with an execution strategy, to making prioritization calls, to organizing program kickoffs, to isolating and mitigating risks, and to eventually drive home and measure impact. The second competency bucket is around stakeholder management. So how you influence stakeholders through leadership, how you achieve alignment on strategy, but also how you synthesize key insights and distill them and drive regular communication updates so that everyone feels involved and is part of a solution as a whole. Questions for both these buckets usually follow the how do you format or tell me about a time format. So a good example could be, how do you make prioritization trade-offs? What are the factors you look at? How do you weigh them against one another? What happens if you make a bad prioritization decision? How would you deal with it? How would you find out if it was the right or wrong decision? Or another example, how would you deal with a program you're managing with huge legal implications that's now running over time? Who would you involve? How would you deal with the situation? What are you going to do about it? What are the factors you take into account? The overall picture. Or for the sort of questions that delve into your past experience, let me give you an example. Tell me about a time where you had to change tactics in the middle of the program. How did you communicate the changes required? How did you deal with the people involved? What finally happened? Or another example. Give me an example of a time where you had to set KPIs for your team. What would you do differently if you had to do this all over again? What was the final outcome? Did you ever change those KPIs as time evolved? Don't forget, in all these questions, it's not just the execution focus that your interviewer is looking for. You also must bring up how you work with stakeholders and involve them as part of your entire equation. Because at the end of the day, program managers at Google, and in fact in most companies, are the glue that knit processes and people together and make sure that, especially for teams, especially for projects that affect multiple teams, drive progress forward in spite of the silos that sometimes naturally crop up. On a much broader level though, I have 5 tips that are particularly relevant when interviewing for Google for a program manager role for this particular interview type. The first, Google interviewers are going to rate you across 4 metrics across pretty much all interviews. We'll probably create a separate video talking about those in more detail, but this interview weighs particularly strongly on general cognitive ability and to some extent on role-related knowledge scores. So make sure that you not just demonstrate your program management skills, but also try to demonstrate competence for that role you're interviewing for through referencing your past experience wherever appropriate, or for theoretical questions, making sure also that you demonstrate that you have knowledge about that domain that goes beyond an average program managers who might not have it or who might not have worked in that scope previously. Second tip, program managers at Google are going to be constantly challenged with numerous problems that they're going to own the solution of. And this interview is going to typically look for your competence in having pulled this off in the past. So make sure you have some success stories that you can reference where you not just talk about the problem and what ended up happening as a consequence, but what your contribution was and how you drove things forward. Because they're going to be very curious to understand how you and your program management skills proved to be a critical lever in driving progress forward. Third tip, wherever possible, don't just talk in the theoretical. Don't just talk in, here's what I would do, or here's how I would deal with it. Talk as much as possible by referencing your past experience. So a good way is, hey, like, let's say even if you're asked a theoretical question, say, my approach to this is going to have 3 prongs. I'm going to look at X, Y, and Z. And this approach is something that I've largely built from experience because I've actually faced situations like this in the past Here's what I faced at that time, here's what I did, here's what went wrong, but in this context, I'm going to hedge against that by doing X, Y, Z extra. Because then that roots your answer in reality. It also demonstrates that you, again, dealt with the situation in the past and that you'll be able to succeed in if you were to face that situation again at Google. Fourth, have at least one example, ideally more, of where you've managed a program end to end. All the way from coming up with a strategy to gathering data and influencing stakeholders into buying into that strategy, to identifying a solution, to planning a roadmap with a scope or a time scale and a budget, and then executing on it all the way until the end. Why is this important? Because the most popular starting question that you're going to face is, tell me about a program that you've managed end to end. And you shouldn't be caught off guard by it or be put onto a spot where you need to start thinking of the right answer at that moment in time. Fifth and finally, and probably the most important, practice. This is pretty much a universal tip across most of my videos, since there's simply no real replacement for good quality practice. And this role is becoming so incredibly competitive that no matter how competent you might actually be in your role, making sure that you demonstrate that competence in an interview is actually a whole different set of skills, because it's going to be high pressure. You're going to get questions that you're not expecting. The interview might go down a tangent that you thought wasn't that interesting or relevant, but it's all the interviewer can seem to care about. So you need to be prepared for that happening. And ultimately, that kind of practice is very different to the sort of practice you get from the on-the-job practice you get, which builds those core competencies out for you. So that's all from me. That's our guidance from Prepfully on how to rock the Google Program Manager program management on-site interview. Once you feel ready for some practice, please go ahead and use Prepfully's free peer interview tooling to just practice with other candidates who are also in their interview journeys. And if you're ready for some paid coaching and specific advice on where your stories aren't perfect or what the gaps are that you still need to overcome, Prepfully is the place to book those as well. We've got, I think last I checked, 19 Google program managers who've been helping candidates. They've had tremendous success helping candidates, and they'll be more than happy to help you as well. I've included both links in the description below for your reference, but I'm also going to include a lot of other useful links. We have an interview question bank that's got lots of examples of what's gotten asked recently. We've got a written guide, not only talking about the interview as a whole, but also in the other on-site rounds and on specifics to the Google interview process that might be interesting or relevant for you. Please feel free to check those out. If there are any other specific topics you'd like me to go into, please mention that in the comments below, or likewise, if you have questions about this interview, about this video and the program management interview in particular, please ask that as well. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks and good luck.
Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe. Our website is prepfully.com. We've got lots of interview questions there. You can also schedule a mock interview with one of our experts. You can find the link in the description below. All the best from us at Prepfully, and we hope you totally rock your interview.